Thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be able to share with you today. Almost 40 years in the fire service when I retired as of January 1st. And some people ask me, said, how do you feel about that? I said, I feel good and bad. I feel weird. I feel happy. I feel all kinds of different things. You can't do something as long as I did for 40 years and not feel weird when you leave it. But my wife, and this is Teresa in the back, if you have any chance of getting out on time today, she's the one that's going to help you do that. So be nice to her. But now I get opportunities, as I mentioned before, I get an opportunity now to be as busy as I choose to be. And that's big. My wife and I have 11 grandchildren, so I get to take a handful of them to the movies when I want to and all kinds of fun stuff. So, but thank you for this today. I still have a passion for the fire service, and I include all of us collectively in that mission and that passion. Now, sometimes what we do, and I'm going to speak about the fire side for a minute. Oftentimes, we become very good at managing incidents. It's just the craziness of the half hour, 1 hour, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day incident. We love doing that. We become pretty good at it. But our Achilles heel, at least on the fire side, is our ability to become organizational managers, to understand what it takes to run an organization, to be strategic, to understand the kind of processes and operations you need to have, to understand the people processes that you need to have in place to run a successful organization. And anymore, when I first came on the job in 1975, how many weren't born in 1975? Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. When I came in 1975, it was more about putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. And what we do has evolved significantly since those days. So what I want to do is I want to talk about two big subjects. I want to talk about the essentials of management in the next hour and a half or so, and then I want to follow up with a second subject that is linked at the hip, and that is the essentials of being a leader. And I tell you what, you can be a great leader, but if you lack organizational management skills, you'll just be a nice person. If you are a great manager but lack leadership, you'll just be a jerk. So this is why these things are so incredibly important. So that's what I want to talk about today. And a lot of the material I'm going to share is from a book called Execution, The Discipline of Getting Things Done by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. Now, Larry Bossidy was the CEO of Allied Sign and Signal. And when he came on that job, Allied Sign and Signal was in deep trouble. But he, through his ability to lead and understand management practices, turned that company around. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today is going to be based upon that book. A great book. I tell you what, there is a lot of books about management out there. A few are good. A lot of them are just stupid. A lot of them are just make it so complicated and so just obtuse that you can't get your fingers into it. What I want to do today is I want to give you the screwdrivers and the pliers to put in your back pocket and to be able to leave today with understanding basic organizational strategy and management practices. Now, some of you are saying, well, I'm not a manager. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In your field of work, you are a manager to some degree. And plus, maybe you may move on in the organization. It's important to understand the principles of management today. And I got to find my clicker. So why do we need this class? The measurement of how good we are, oftentimes as a manager, is based upon our ability to execute, the ability to get things done. People get fired for not executing well, especially in the private industry. And America's fire service, and I speak about all of us inclusive, will fall from grace if we cannot become competent managers and organizational leaders. So that's why I'm so passionate about this class and why it's so important all of us understand the essential elements of management. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, as long as I don't cough, how many of you had this stinking cold that's been going around? And then it leaves a gracious present afterwards, and it's a cough that just won't go away. So I went to the doctor, and I asked her, I says, I'd like you to wave your magic wand over me and make this stinking cough go away. And she laughed and says, here's a prescription. So it hasn't worked all that well, so excuse me if I begin to cough. But our course objectives today is understand that the skills of a manager are linked at the hip to the skills of a leader, which we're going to talk about later on this afternoon. Understand how people, process, and strategy are the three pillars to organizational management. See, that's what we're going to break it down to today. That's what we're going to boil it down to. The three pillars of management: people, process, and strategy. Now, for leadership, we're going to talk about this afternoon, it's character, competence, and connection. 3 and 3. Try to make it as simple as I can for people like me. Understand what each of the core processes are and how you can implement them. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish in the next hour and a half. I'm going to read you a quick story. I love these little stories, these life stories here. This one is true. I'm going to take out the names to protect the innocent or the guilty. The CEO was sitting in his office one evening looking tired and drained. He was trying to explain to a visitor why his great strategic initiative had failed, but he could not figure out what went wrong. I am so frustrated, he said. I got a group together a year ago, people from all divisions, and we had 2 great off-site meetings, did benchmarking, got the metrics, everyone agreed with the plan. It was a great plan. I got the brightest team in the industry together. We assigned stretch goals. I empowered them, gave them the freedom to do what they wanted to do and needed to do. Everyone knew there were warriors in the panelists who worked together with high energy. How could we fail? Yet the year has come to an end and we missed our goals. The team let me down. They did not deliver results. They have lowered earnings estimates 4 times in a row in the last 9 months. We've lost our credibility as a company on Wall Street, and I predictably lost my credibility with the board. I don't even know where the bottom is, and frankly, I'm not even sure how long my job will last here. And several weeks later, the board did indeed fire him. Now, a couple of significant statements this person made here is you can have the greatest plan in the world, but if you lack the people processes and the operational processes to implement it, you're going to be like this person. And plus, another significant thing this person said, he says, my team let me down. No, they didn't. No, they didn't at all. It just, again, he didn't have the core processes of organizational management together to make this big dream come true. So, objective number 1 is we're going to talk about, catch up to my notes here. We're going to understand that the skills of a manager are, again, linked to the fundamentals, principles of being a leader. Now, again, without leadership, management is it's about pushing rocks uphill. And how many of you work for managers that were just terrible people? Don't raise your hand because I know who some of your bosses are. You don't raise your hand. That's a dumb question. But all of us have worked for people that maybe they were very, very bright, but some of them lacked character. Some of them lacked integrity. Some of them would throw you under the bus in a heartbeat if it would promote their position or cover up a mistake that they made. Those people aren't leaders because they lack character and they lack commitment and they lack compassion and connection to the people on their team. So a true leader inspires followers. And again, there's all kinds of great definitions of a leader. We're going to talk about some of those this afternoon. But I love the one where a leader is someone who a person will follow willingly regardless of their position. Wow, think about that for a second. At one time, I worked for this one individual, and him and I were having a significant challenge. And one time I spouted off, and I said, every once in a while, a leader has to stop, look back over their shoulder, and make sure people are still following them. And I said, you look over your shoulder, you find out you're all alone. He got pretty mad. But again, this is an example of how sometimes we miss the mark about understanding how to be a person of integrity and character, because we can never, ever give that up. You can never sacrifice that regardless, ever. So simply put, leadership is influence. The ideal leader who's someone whose life and character motivate people to follow. Now again, we're going to talk more about that at 3 o'clock this afternoon. But I want to make the point right now is that leadership and management are 2 very distinct skill sets. But they are linked together, and you must have both to be successful. So, the 3 C's of leadership, we already talked about that a minute ago. We're going to talk about it at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Character, competence, connection. Now, here's something to get you thinking. Connection to what or to who? How many of you had this class before? Couple? Yeah, it's connection to the people who have been entrusted to your leadership. And I'll be using that term a lot because if you can think about the term entrusted, that's a game changer, folks. It is an absolute game changer to think that people are entrusted to you. Think about that. Character, competence, and connection. Character is who and what you are. It's your integrity. The competence is your competence to do your job. Again, you can be a great, great leader, but if you lack the competence to do your job, both the management or the specific skills of your assignment, then you'll be nothing more than a nice person. So you have to have competence in what you do and connection to the people who have been entrusted to your leadership. So, but now we're going to talk about essentials of management. And this we're going to talk about is people, process, and strategy. Now, if you read the book, Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done, what you'd find is that book talks about people, operations, and strategy. Now, in the fire service, operations means something else. So I swapped that word up with processes. So people, process, and strategy. Those are the three fundamental pillars of organizational management I want to talk about today. And we're going to spend some time, we're going to break every single one of these down and help you understand what each of these fundamental pillars mean. So, again, these are the three characters, or the three pillars of leadership: character, competence, connection, people, process, and strategy. Now, I told you they're very distinct skill sets, but can you tell where the linkage is between the two? Where is it? What do you think? People, exactly. Exactly. Because if you're going to have the right people doing the right stuff, trained in the right way, you need to be a leader of people. So that's the connection. Again, two very distinct skill sets, but they're linked together through people. Through people. So, objective 2, understand how people, process, and strategy are the primary functions of a manager. Now, how long would you be in your job if you couldn't get anything done? Let's put aside governmental service for a second. Let's just talk about the private industry. How long would you be in place if you couldn't get anything done? Not very long, because we read these kind of stories all the time. CEOs getting fired, other people getting fired because they couldn't deliver. So execution is the difference between aspiration, the dreams of getting things done, and the skills of actually getting things done. And execution is an actual skill. It truly is. Meaningful change only comes through effective execution. A plan will collapse if you can't execute it. Execution is a discipline. So these are very, very important when it comes to execution, getting things done, the mark of an effective manager. And again, like a conductor of an orchestra, you no longer play the trumpet, but now you're leading the harmony of an orchestra. Think about that for a second. I mean, typically a conductor, he's come up through the ranks, he's played multiple instruments, I'm sure. I'm not a music guy, my wife is. But nonetheless, a conductor has spent a lifetime playing individual instruments. And now the person is now at the front of the stadium, the front of the group, the front of the orchestra, and now they're leading all this different, varied type of instruments. That person is no longer playing an instrument, but they're making sure that the blend of all the instruments accomplish beautiful music. So that is a lot of what a manager does. They're like an orchestra conductor leading a band, leading an orchestra to make beautiful music together. And again, if one person is off key, then it messes up the entire music. So the conductor is there to make sure everybody is working together on the same sheet of music, playing beautiful music. So that's the example oftentimes I give of an effective manager. They're like a conductor of an orchestra. How many of you took typing in high school? I did too, and I was kicking and screaming to go into typing class. I didn't want to go there, but I tell you what, it was one of the most beneficial classes I had because I still use it to this day. And of course, when I took typing, yes, we had mechanical typewriters, and they didn't have the delete button. We had whiteout, we had whatever. But what I found is that typing, and we made our kids take it too. We have 3 kids. We made them take typing as well, although then I think it was keyboard. But it's an amazing skill that I use every single day. Now, for those of you that took typing, what can you tell me about the home keys? Don't make me walk. I pick on the people in the back row, so don't make me walk back there. Yeah? Yeah, where the index fingers go, which are the two where your index fingers go on the home keys? And J? Ooh, I remember one of them. Is that why are the home keys arranged? Because this is where your fingers live. So why do they put those keys there under where your fingers live? They're the most used, exactly. And so there are skills that you have as a manager that are like home keys, that you have to have your fingers on those home keys all the time. Now again, oftentimes these are the letters. Oh, I used to hate numbers too in typing class. But again, these letters down here are the ones you still have to know where they're at, because you're going to hit those oftentimes too. And so that's the analogy I want to give you with some of these organizational management skills. And I'm going to be asking your opinion as we talk throughout the afternoon as to what management skills you think are like the home keys on a typewriter. So this is going to be class participation. There's some of you back there saying, can I get out? Is the door locked? I won't embarrass you. So understand what the core processes are, and that's what we're going to be talking about right now. So first, remember, let's go through them again. What are the three pillars of a manager? People, process, strategy. Okay, good. So now we're going to be talking specifically about people. So specifically people. Now, there are certain, we're going to talk about the different things you have to build a team of people that be able to accomplish beautiful music together. It's the most important element. It's more important than process nor strategy. Because if you don't have the right people together, if you have not selected the right people, then you're going to be in deep trouble. How many of you heard Gordon Graham speak? Great. I mean, the very first time I heard him speak, I was a captain in our information management division. And they told us that it was mandatory that we listen to this video of this disheveled individual who worked for, you've seen him before, of this disheveled individual who works for the California Highway Patrol. Gordon Graham is brilliant. Gordon Graham is an amazing speaker. And I sat in front of a television set and listened to Gordon Graham teach a very difficult subject. And after I laughed until I cried, I learned a ton of information. Gordon Graham is an amazing speaker on risk management. And one of the things he said, although somewhat crude, regarding the people process, he says, you don't make turds, you hire them. Now think about that for a second. It's crude, but somewhat profound. So the people process, who you select to be on your team, is very, very, very important. It is the most important element. If you don't get the people process right, you will never fulfill your mission. And I tell you what, in governmental service, all of us know this very well. If once we hire the wrong person, getting rid of them, need I say more? So it's very, very difficult. So getting the people process right is very, very important. So developing a robust people process, and we're going to take apart each of these elements here for the next few minutes. Develop a culture of execution, expectation that you expect people to actually get things done. Develop a culture of innovation. Develop an employee hiring process, support your strategy. Develop an employee evaluation process that is meaningful. All of us have employee evaluation processes, but sometimes they're just not meaningful. We'll talk about that here in a little bit too. And develop a leadership pipeline. So let's take apart each one of these things. Anybody has any questions, feel free. So, people process, how to develop a culture of execution. Oftentimes I see a big mistake that people make is when they go into a new position, they're promoted to a new position. Oftentimes in the first day, sometimes in the very first day, they'll come in and give you this, I'm the new sheriff in charge, and now you're going to do things my way. Now, good or bad? Yeah, bad. It's a horrible thing to do. Then on the flip side of that, I've seen a person who has risen that position, been promoted, and 2 years later says, okay, here's my expectations. Yeah, bad as well. So there's a balance to what you need to do, but nonetheless, you need to tell people clearly what results you are expecting them to accomplish. Don't do it in your first day. One of the things when I was a field battalion chief, and I was noticed that I was going to be transferred to our emergency medical services section. Now, I've been a paramedic for a long time. I figured, how hard can that be? It was a wonderful experience, but it was a learning experience for me as well. And I wish I would have read, way back then, a book called The First 90 Days. Because it was the suggestion on the things that you as a new leader, as a new manager to position, need to think about in the first 90 days of your position. So one of the things I did indeed do is I spent time with every one of my people. And I says, what do you think are the 3 things that we are really good at in the emergency medical services section? And what are the things that you think the 3 things are really bad at? And then I asked him, if you were me, what are some of the things that you would change? A couple things that did. It educated me significantly about what the challenges were in the section. But what do you think it did to the people who are now looking at me and says, who the heck are you and what do you know about this business? Yeah, it made them think, wow, this guy values what I say. So these are some of the very, very important things about managing people. But nonetheless, at some point, and I would say after the first 90 days, if you have a very set process on what you're going to accomplish in this first 90 days, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit as well, is you will be able to come to the point that you say, these are the things that I expect you to do. And then you have to have religious follow-through to make sure that you're getting that. So discuss how to get those results is the key element of the coaching process. Sometimes people will say, well, gosh, those are great expectations. I'm not exactly sure how. Well, that's your job to help them understand how. That's part of the coaching process. And then reward people for producing results. Now, this is a challenge in governmental service as well. How can we reward people? First off, how does the private industry reward people? Bonuses. We have a next-door neighbor, great guy. He works for private industry. I can always tell when he's doing really good and received a bonus because what? Oh, maybe a new car or remodeling his house. You know, so all kinds of things are going on around bonus season. And frankly, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome that the private industry has that ability to financially reward people who are hitting the ball out of the park. But governmental services, we don't have that ability to do that, at least not to that degree. So let me ask you a question. What are some of the ideas on how you can reward people for hitting the ball out of the park? Give me some ideas. Sir?
One thing I've tried to do is let people take on a pet project. It might not be core to what you're trying to do, but it's relative and it's important. But people want to kind of take on some things that interest them. So as long as it's related to the mission, I think it's a good way to keep people kind of encouraged and they earn that.
So what you do is if you do a great job, you give them more work. No, I'm just teasing. No, that's great.
It's subversive, yes.
No, that's a great idea because what that shows is you trust them and you're willing to let them go to the next level. Any other ideas? How do you reward people? Yes, sir.
Opportunity for personal growth.
Okay.
Whether it be, she said, a day off or maybe education to something that if you accomplished a goal and you succeeded, okay, now I'm going to reward you with personal growth, opportunity to expand on that.
Okay. Okay, what else? Yes, ma'am.
I know that in meetings you recognize that person for their work well done.
Excellent.
It encourages other people to jump on board.
Good. Good. Am I making you crazy yet? This always makes the video guy crazy when I walk around the room because he's always trying to chase me down. Other ideas? How can you reward people? Yes, sir.
I just go to simple thing. Either take them out to lunch or give them a gift card.
Yeah, good. A gift card. Yeah, great idea. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Let them know.
Good work performance evaluation.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I think you have to mean that, though. You can't just give it lip service.
Yes. You mean the performance evaluation, you mean? Of course, the PE is a year later, too, typically in most organizations. So, but that's good.
You're not going to lie.
Yeah, that's good, though. That's good. That's part of it. I think I'm missing one. Recognition. How? Whoops, sorry.
Public recognition amongst your peers. You're telling everybody what a great job he's done, patting on the back in public.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. What's that?
Thank you.
Yes. See, a thank you letter And some people, they don't value that specific thing enough. But let me tell you a couple of problems with a thank you letter is don't ever, ever, ever use a form thank you letter. Thank you for a job well done with an electronic signature. That don't work so good. You know, but hey, John, thank you for doing this. Specifically name it. Thank you for this project because it made a difference in this way. A personalized thank you note that specifically rewards them for specifically what they did. And here's something weird, is when you sign it, first off, sign it personally. And sign it in a different color ink. Because oftentimes machines can mimic our signatures, but when you sign it in a different color ink, and then maybe in the upper right corner put, great job in your own handwriting. So that's a personalized thing that people say, wow, the boss noticed. So good. So even though we don't have the same abilities, I'm moving this thing. Even though we don't have the same abilities to reward as we do in the private industry, there's still effective ways to reward our people. And performance evaluations is one very significant one. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So tell people how to develop a culture of execution. Well, tell people what you're looking for. Don't keep them in the dark. And do it at the right time. If you're a seasoned manager in a position, then do so on the first day. If you're coming into a position as a new leader in a new section or division, then spend a little bit of time first knowing your person, your people, and your mission, and your section or division before you jump in there and start laying out expectations. And again, maybe 90 days is that magic mark. And that's the one I use. Reward people for producing results, and deal appropriately with people who don't produce. Oh, this is a mistake I see so many times, is people don't deal appropriately with people who make mistakes. And I'm not talking about the mistakes that we all make, because we all make them. But when you fail to produce results, whether it's a combination of laziness or lack of focus or lack of ability, one of the first questions you have to ask yourself, have I as a manager failed my person, failed my employee who is entrusted to my leadership? Have I failed to coach them? One of the things that gets you in big trouble right away is writing a negative PE with no supporting documentation over the previous 12-month period. People look at that as a process problem. I look at it more as a betrayal problem. Because really, this is the first time you've told them that they've been screwing up, and it's a year later? Really? Tell me what school that makes sense in, because it makes no sense at all. But you must deal appropriately, because here's the problem. In the way that we work, the people that don't do a good job, they'll be known. The people that do a good job, they'll be known. And if you treat them all the same way, that's going to demoralize your team. It truly will. So, develop a culture of execution, of getting things done. And these are the 4 things I would suggest that you concentrate on. They're all in your notes there. The 4 things I would suggest you concentrate on to develop a culture of execution. Any questions about the first element of the people pillar? Okay. Now, the second element of the people pillar is developing a culture of execution. We're going to go into a little bit more detail about this. Tell people what results you're looking for. Now, we already talked about that, I think to a significant degree. Don't do it in the first day if you're in a new position. Do it in the first day, or thereabouts, if you're a seasoned manager in the same position with a new person. If you're in the new position, take about 90 days and have a plan on what you're going to accomplish in those 90 days. A good friend of ours that goes to church with us, he was promoted into a very significant management position. It's a very different cultural expectation for him, because before he's in more of a support role to an executive. Now he's in a management role to a group of individuals. And so one of the first things I told him, I says, okay, we got to work on your plan for the first 90 days. So what do you mean I don't go in there and say, this is what we got? No, the first 90 days is going to be mostly about you. It's mostly about helping you understand what the challenges of your section are. So again, either first day if you're a seasoned manager in that position, or somewhere around 90 days, but only if you have a plan. Only if you have a plan that's going to lay, I'm going to talk to my people, I'm going to understand what the challenges are, I'm going to understand what my boss's expectations are, I'm going to communicate those things, developing those things. The first 90 days as a manager is a great book. So, 90-day targets for a new manager. Notice of expectation. This is a big thing in our governmental services now. is when you lay out the expectations of what you want your people to accomplish, put it down in writing. Now, you can't make it in such a document that's so hard-hitting and needling that's going to demoralize your people. It's got to be some sort of a coaching, positive document. And that's what you have to develop. Nonetheless, it ought to be in writing as well. Everybody that comes to work for you ought to get some sort of a list of expectations. Do you call it notice of expectations? I would suggest you don't. You can put your own name to it, but make it positive, but make it specific enough that people know what you expect. Again, that book, 90-Day Targets for a New Manager, is outstanding. Discuss how to get results as a key element of the coaching process. Now again, if you give somebody a project and you say, I want you to accomplish this in 6 months, I'll come back to talk to you in 6 months. Good idea or bad idea? Really bad idea. Again, you have to sit down and say, okay, you together with your team need to develop a project sheet or whatever you want to put, you put a name to it and say, this one I want you to accomplish. Let's break this down into pieces. And say, piece 1 is due here, piece 2, are you okay with that? Do we have enough people and processes in place to make sure that you accomplish piece 1 and piece 2? Make sure this is a collaborative document that you develop. Now, granted, maybe your boss says, I want this thing done in 6 months. Well, granted, you have some significant challenges, and it may require getting some more people or financing to get it done. But nonetheless, you got to sit down in the coaching process and say, this is what we want to do. These are the pieces to accomplish it. These are the dates due that each of these pieces have, and then you need to follow up. That when that first piece is due, you'd call them up, you bring them into your office during one of your weekly meetings, say, hey, how is that going? Well, let me tell you what, it's not going so well. I'm really sorry. What's the problem? Materials management. Materials management, they won't even return my phone calls. Well, you should have told me about that 3 weeks ago. Who you been dealing with in materials management? So-and-so. Hello, so-and-so? See, this is how you help your people and support them. But you never know those are a problem unless you have regular meetings regarding these processes of execution. Does that make sense? And one of the things that you cannot do, and this has been a mistake that I've made from time to time in my early career, is don't assume that the supporting divisions or sections that are outside of your organization that are vital to accomplish your project, make sure they're in the loop. We're going to be talking about that on the core pillar of process. That's a mistake that many people make. So whether you use a project tracking form, I don't care what you use, but have a way to do it. How many of you used to use a Franklin Day Planner? Oh, I used to use a Franklin Day Planner. And when I was a captain, I used to use one. And one of the things my crews would do is they would steal it and hide it. Oh yeah, you ever see what happens when you pull a wing off a moth? You just kind of go around in a circle. That'd be like me. You know, so I used to use a Franklin Day Planner, but now you've got some tremendous electronic tracking programs. Outlook, has ability to track things. Outlook is awesome. Yeah, I mean, when you get an email from your boss and says, Mike, do this, do that, you can forward it to your taskbar. You can take a look at, I want it done by Friday. And you look at your calendar and say, well, I can't do it on Friday because I got a whole bunch of meetings, but I can do it Monday or Wednesday afternoon. So now what you do is you take that email, Mike, do this, you transfer it to your task in Outlook, you look at your calendar and it says Wednesday afternoon, I'll have time to do that, and now you schedule that for like an appointment on your calendar. Work on the task from the boss on Wednesday from 1 to 4. See, that's the way you accomplish things by actually scheduling time for yourself and not waiting until Friday when you look at your task list and say, oh, rats, the boss had a project that's due today and I have no time to do it. So that's one element. And also, if you have a due date for your folks, that the first part of a task is due on February 28th, you can send that to Outlook Tasks. You can put February 28th, talk to John Smith about Project A. And when February 28th comes, you can say, oh, I got to talk to John about Project A. Or you can just put a task or a task in Outlook and just put John's first name or John's last name, doesn't matter. And that way, when you have a meeting, all you do is search for all the tasks under John. And guess what? You have an instant agenda for your meeting with your subordinates if you do it that way. Outlook tasks is great. But nonetheless, you've got to have a process in place, and there's great electronic ones right now, to do those kinds of things. So take a look at Outlook. I see some people saying, I didn't know Outlook had that. Oh, it does, and it's great. It's a very, very robust process. There's also another one. There's an app called Wunderlist. I use it now that I'm retired because I don't have to use the big tasks anymore. So that's another option. But there's great, great task management software out there. And you don't have to buy a Microsoft project manager that has a owner's manual that's about this thick. You don't have to do that. Outlook Task is great. But nonetheless, you've got to develop a process of execution, of expectation. And this is the key, that once you give an assignment to your folks, and those assignments are broken down into pieces and due dates, you have got to grow an expectation, and the people have been entrusted to your leadership, that when it comes that day, you will be asking the question. You've got to develop that expectation. That is incredibly important. Project planning form. Again, I don't care which ones you use, but you got to use it. When you have a significant project that's been assigned to you that may take a year to accomplish, may take 2 years to accomplish, may take a number of people to accomplish it, then you have to have some sort of a project management form, tracking form, program, whatever. Don't care what it is, you've got to have it if you're going to be an effective manager and manage the people process of execution. And again, reward people for producing results. We just talked about this to a great length, and there's some great ideas on how to do that. But make it clear that those you recommend for promotion are those that execute. There's been a lot of folks that I've recommended for promotion. There's been some people I didn't recommend for promotion. There have been some people that I said, you shouldn't be promoted. What? Oh, that doesn't make you very, very, very friendly with some of those folks. But nonetheless, if you do that, then the people that hit the ball out of the park for you will know you value them. But if you give this slug a recommendation for promotion just because they work for you, I'll never forget, I had a meeting with this individual. He wanted to be a staff assistant for me. And I says, well, what are you looking for from this job? He says, I am looking for you to give me a recommendation to promote me. If I come work for you, will you give me a recommendation to promote me to this position? And I said, let me think. No. He says, what? I says, I might, or I will. I promise you I will, if you do a great job. But if you just come to work and breathe room air, then not only will I not give you a recommendation to promote you, I will stand in the way of your promotion. Guess what happened to that person? He pulled his application. Yeah, but see, these are very, very important things, because then you set that expectation right up front. You do a great job, I'll take care of you. You don't do a great job, we're going to be coaching, we're going to spend a lot of time together. Some of that you may not like, but these are very, very important things. And you don't have to be a jerk in doing that, but these are expectations that are important. So make it clear, letters of commendation, and all the other things we just talked about. Deal appropriately with those who don't produce results. Poor performance evaluation. Let's talk about performance evaluations for a minute. I used to see way too many performance evaluations where everybody that worked for this individual would all get outstandings. Have you seen that before? Now, let me tell you, some of us smile and say, well, yeah, I know, because that person that's just the way they are. But let me tell you, that is horribly destructive to your team. Horribly destructive. Because a person who is hitting the ball out of the park, who deserves an outstanding, will hear, and they do, you gave an outstanding to that person? Are you flippin' kidding me? And then that person begins to draw a comparison. Say, I knocked myself out. And I got this. That person just came to work and breathed room air and got the same thing. What'll that do to your home run hitter? It'll bring them down. It'll demoralize them. Absolutely. So please be careful with your performance evaluations. And I promise you, that will not make you all that popular unless it is not a surprise when you give that performance evaluation to that individual. If you've been working coaching them throughout the year, but do not make the mistake of trying to be a nice person to everybody and give everybody a very good. I worked for this one person, and every performance evaluation I would sit down and say, when they gave it to me, and I would say, or most of them, I'd say, okay, what else can I do to do a better job for you? And especially if I got maybe a very good evaluation, outstanding is the top and very good is the second and competent is the third. And sometimes I say if I got a very good, I said, what do I need to do to get an outstanding evaluation? And I forget 2 managers I work with. They both told me, I never give outstandings because I don't think anybody deserves it. Really? I'm thinking to myself, oh, there's all kinds of things I was thinking to myself. But that's ludicrous. That is ludicrous. So don't make that mistake either. Hopefully none of you do. So other performance management tools, and we've talked about some of those already. But deal appropriately with people who don't produce results because that'll establish expectations. Develop a culture of innovation. And I tell you, innovation is so important. We could spend an entire class on innovation, but develop a culture of innovation. And I tell you what, I'll teach this in leadership. I'll spend more time on this on leadership. But the people who identify, who do nothing but identify problems, is there a nickname for those folks? Whiners, yes, exactly, yeah. They're whiners, exactly. Because I tell you what, people who do nothing but identify problems are a dime a dozen. You can scoop them up by the armfuls on any corner. But the people who identify problems, but instead focus on solutions, they're worth $1 million. And those are the people that help you innovate. And you got to find them. We'll talk about more about that in the afternoon session. So develop a culture of innovation. So the people process. We're going to talk about now tips to hiring the right person. Again, all these things can be a class in and of themselves. So this is a high-level view of the elements of the people process, but tips to hire the right person. I tell you what, if you're going to hire somebody, one of the things you need to do is not only look at their job description, all of us have one and HR has them, but you need to look at specifically what you expect that person to do. And then once you have that list of things you want that person to do, now you have to develop a list of the skill sets that person needs to accomplish those. I've seen a lot of employee interviews or selection interviews that really were just so vague. You know, give me an idea of the happiest day in your life. Some of those kind of questions. Just, okay, you need to develop a list of skills that are important for that person to have. What skills will your strategic initiatives need? If you've got a big project that's coming up, and you need somebody with a specific skill set to accomplish that project, and you're hiring a person specific for that project, then that person needs to have the skill sets to do the job. So you need to assess those. You need to assess them, list them, and then test for them. Test for those skills. Ask previous employers about those specific skill sets. A person has to be able to communicate that to you. I've seen a lot of people that I thought may have had it inside, but they couldn't communicate it well. Now, if you had a person that you thought maybe had really great skill sets, but the inability to communicate, should that be a block to hiring them? Now, I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about the inability to create coherent sentences and communicate with other people. If you're working in a team environment, especially if that person is going to lead others, they have to have an ability to communicate. They have to. And I'm not talking about being a skilled orator, but if you want to impart vision, if you want people that work for you to help you impart vision, they need to have a degree of communication skills. But ask previous employers, how'd they do? That's very important. You got to develop a process for hiring the right person. Evaluate execution. One of the things you should do is ask that person, give me a list of 3 significant projects that took you 6 or more months to accomplish. Tell me what you did and how successful those projects were and how they were integrated into the organization. Oh, I get some interesting looks when I ask that question. But it's a very, very important to understand because that'll help you determine if that person has a kind of mindset to do that kind of work. If they look at you with kind of their eyes go glazed and they say, well, I can't think of any projects of that magnitude. Is that a good sign or a bad sign? Of course, it's a bad sign if you want that kind of person to work on projects of that magnitude. Another example, how they use people that have been assigned to them. Have you had people that work for you before? Oh, yes, I have. How have you used them? And that project you just talked to me about, how did you use them to accomplish the mission? Well, I poked at them. I gave them direct orders, and I had significant matrices that I held over their head and made them do the right thing. Good or bad? Bad, yeah. But on the other hand, it says, I shared the expectations. It was a collaborative environment. They helped me design the project plan. And then we met regularly to make sure that they're on time and the things are being done. Is that good or bad? It's great. You have to do that kind of stuff. So evaluate execution. Evaluate attitude. Attitude, oh my goodness. And attitude, you can feel that. It's palpable. I don't need to go into a dissertation about that. But people have to have the right kind of attitude if they're going to be part of a team. Exactly. Do they value people? Or are they loners? There's some jobs you can be a loner and be successful. But in most team-based environments, you can't be a loner and be successful. So try them before you buy them. Sometimes you can try these kind of people, maybe go out to an outside division or something in your organization or another section and say, hey, can I borrow so-and-so to help me work on a project? You're thinking to yourself, I think they've got some skills. I've seen them work, but I want to try them out a little bit first. That's a great opportunity if you have that structure within your organization to try them before you buy them, try them before you promote them, try them before they're brought into your section working for you. So give them a project to do and see how successful they are in doing it. That's a great way to choose the right people to bring into your team. And again, honest evaluation that is based on a great part about your notice of expectations, on budget, quality throughout. Again, this is saying, okay, this is a project we worked on together. You were in charge of that. Was it on budget? Was it on time? And did it have the kind of quality that is expected? And here's a fourth thing that's really, really important and a very, very difficult skill to master. It's one thing to do a project and to get it done on time, within budget, and within quality. But it's a different kind of skill set to be able to implement that project and integrate it within an organization. That's even harder. So again, evaluate for those kinds of things in a person that you want to hire. Ooh, leadership pipeline, otherwise known as succession planning. And I tell you what, we got to learn about succession planning. We got to do a better job. There's a great book about succession planning called The Leadership Pipeline by Ram Charan again. Great, although it speaks mostly about the private business world. And if you translate it into your organizational structure that you happen to live with in your organization, it gives you a great insight in identifying future leaders. Because I tell you what, if you promote somebody into a position that they cannot function all that well in, you're going to clog up your leadership pipeline. You truly, truly will. So identify those existing and emerging leaders and detail them temporary projects to test them. Do you think it's right to assess how many people you have that are close to retirement? Is that legal? Sure it is. Okay, can you not promote them because they're close to retirement? No. But again, you need to understand which ones are close to maybe getting a promotion, to retiring, because you have to think about succession planning. Now, a great example with General Electric, when Walsh was in charge of General Electric, is that there was a vice president of General Electric who was hired by Albertsons to be the CEO. Now, what happened within 24 hours at General Electric is that vice president's position was filled within 24 hours, and within 72 hours, all the vacancies that were created by that new promotion were filled within 72 hours. How do you think they did that? You think it was like this, flip a coin and figure it out? No. They had a robust people process and a leadership pipeline. So they knew that when people are talented, oftentimes they'll get sucked away by different companies. And Walsh identified that as a probability. And he had a people list of folks ready because he tested them that are ready for that next level of promotion. And that's the kind of mindset that we need to develop as well as we look at succession planning and developing a leadership pipeline. You, in developing, this is part of the people process, right, folks? Developing succession planning, begin to fill your leadership pipeline. Again, a class in and of itself, but you need to understand who is getting ready to go, who you need to replace, the people, the openings that you're going to have, and develop a leadership pipeline to be able to help you with that. So, this is a review of what we just covered. So, what are the 3 pillars again? People, process, strategy. This is the 4 elements of the people process. Develop a culture of execution, of getting things done. Develop an employee hiring process that supports your strategy. Develop an employee evaluation process that rewards execution. Develop a leadership pipeline. Any questions about the first pillar called people? Anything? Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about the coaching process and telling them how to get the results, I'd like clarification on that because there are a lot of managers today who feel they need to tell you exactly, step by step, day by day, minute by minute, called micromanaging or in the weeds, how to do your job. And that's
Yep.
not what you're hired for.
Nope.
You are hired to do a job, so they shouldn't have to tell you exactly how to do your job.
Yes, and you have a good point. But let's say you sit down and develop a project. It's going to be a 6-month project. You bring your team together, and you begin to have input as far as what the elements, what the objectives are of those projects, the tasks that are required. And oftentimes what you'll see is an individual, you say, they maybe are a little bit rusty in this particular skill set. So as part of my coaching process, I'm going to have to come alongside of them and help them with that. But now if you've got somebody strong in a particular area, you don't need to hang over their shoulder. But again, this is the skill of being a proper coach. A proper coach, when you watch a Super Bowl, why'd they throw the pass at the end? Who made that call? Again, part of the coaching process is understanding who needs help and who doesn't. Does that make sense? Any other questions? The people pillar, one of the most important. Okay. So people, as an essential element of management, is the who. Process defines who you'll accomplish or how you'll accomplish a project. The who is the people, the process is the how, the strategy is the essential elements of what you want to accomplish. So now let's spend some time talking about process. Now process is the essential elements of management, especially those of you that work in large organizations. You understand that if you're with an IT project, then you're going to have your IT department is going to have to be on board to help you. If you've got a project of implementing a new type of response vehicle, you're going to have fleet involved in helping you. You're going to have the proper budget and the people in budget to help you figure this out. If it's a grant project, then you're going to have the grant people helping you. These are all high-level examples of how to have all the processes in place to help you accomplish it. Because rarely when you're working on a significant project will you be responsible for all the ways in which it touches the organization. So let's talk about a couple of examples of that. I think most of these are true. And again, I've removed the names to protect the guilty. Find it here. Anyway, I think I can remember it. Okay, here's a hypothetical situation. You call up your fleet maintenance division and says, okay, we got these 3 response vehicles in. I need to have them in service in 30 days. I need to have radios and light bars installed within 30 days so we can meet the requirements of this project. And fleet comes back and says, wow, wish you had talked to me about that earlier because I've installed every set of radios and every set of light bars I have on the police vehicles that just came in. So I have nothing until next November. These are real life things, and here's a great one. I've heard this once, only once. Is what do you mean the fire trucks we just bought won't fit into the apparatus bays? What do you mean they're too tall? Or what do you mean that just because this vehicle the trailer weighs over 10,000 pounds, you have to have a different driver's license to drive it? See, these are examples of processes that oftentimes involve elements of the organization that's outside of your expertise. And so this is why you have to have processes in place, or the process of management working well to support you. So, what is process? It's effective project management. It could be the use of whatever project tracking tool that you choose to ascribe to. It's measures or methods of measuring progress towards a goal, religious follow-through. We talk about that a lot in this class, religious follow-through. Sometimes my people, oftentimes they say, I give them this Outlook task thing. It says, hey, we talked about you're going to have this done by Thursday. How's it going? I haven't seen it yet. And again, the people who used to work for me would understand that was going to be an expectation. Gosh, boss, I'm sorry. I'll have it to you Thursday. How about I tell you this afternoon? I promise. But again, they understand that you're going to ask the question. Religious follow-through, synchronizing other sections or divisions who have a degree of ownership or participation in your operations. You have to do this. You have to do this. One time I was in this one position, and this person called me up and says, 4.5 years ago we got a grant to buy a whole bunch of atropine injectors. It was a great deal. But they're going to expire in 6 months. What? Yeah. And it's not in our budget. And we got to take them off all the rigs, all 170 rigs in November. What are we going to do, boss? Again, this is process. Because when it was bought 5 years ago, there should have been a project in place to replace them when they expired in 5 years, right? I think many of you, especially in your jobs, understand that. This is all about making the processes of the organization work. Now, typically, many times in our organizations, sometimes managers don't stay for 5 years. To bring those kinds of things to, for follow-up, how do you deal with that? Any ideas? How do you deal with that? Backup, policy and procedures, SOGs, strategic planning document. Strategic planning document help you with this too. Oftentimes, I remember, I'll never forget this, when I was first assigned to as the chief of emergency medical services, Los Angeles County Fire Department. The guy that I replaced, he says, Mike, come down to my house. I'll give you the keys to the car, and we'll sit down and talk. I thought, oh, thank God. Thank God. He's going to impart all this wisdom on me. He's going to give me all this information about everything I need to do. Oh, and you know what's coming, don't you? You've probably been there before. And I sat down with him at his house, and I see all kinds of boxes that are already packed up. He was retired and moving. And the extent of our conversation that I was so hungry for was a set of car keys and a cup of coffee. Oh, yeah. So hopefully answer the question is that we have to have strategic plans within our divisions or sections. The organization has to have a plan, but your organizational section or division needs to have a strategic plan as well. And so this way, if you get promoted, move on to the next position, you've got your section or division strategic plan that you can hand to that individual and say, in 5 years from now, we've got to replace all the atropine injectors. It's on the plan. So see how that works? That's part of process. That's part of process. So that's what it is. Let's talk about the effective elements of project management. Setting a goal and be specific. We're going to talk about each one of these individually. Project management. Again, this is a class in and of itself, so we can't spend much time here. You will not get what you do not measure. Let me repeat that again. You will not get what you do not measure. Measuring progress towards a goal will allow you to make mid-course corrections. And if you have to break down an objective or a project, an individual task, then do so. Because you need to make sure that everything is getting done and your internal process within your organization aren't tripping you up. What do you mean that materials management? Or what do you mean that information management hasn't returned your call in 3 weeks? Yeah, boss, I tried. I left him 3 messages. Sorry, I did the best I could. Is that good enough? No. What should that person have done? Come to me. Come to you. Say, hey, I gave them one message. They haven't returned my call. I left a second message. Still haven't returned the call. Boss, I need some help. This is where you come in and help your person unblock that log jam. So you have to have that. Follow through is a cornerstone of execution, is the cornerstone, religious follow through. You must adequately follow through, and you must develop an expectation. We've talked about this a number of times already. Develop an expectation in your people's minds that are entrusted to your leadership, that you will ask the question when it's time to ask the question. Hey, how's that going? How's that report done? How's that widget? Is that widget completed? How's things going? The Hawthorne Effect. Interesting. Anybody ever heard of the Hawthorne Effect? It happened in the 1950s, if I remember right, in Hawthorne, Nevada. There was a factory that made widgets. And somebody had the interesting idea. They says, you know, I think if we installed lights in the factory, that we would produce more widgets. Well, that's an interesting thought. And so sure enough, they installed lights in the factory, and guess what? They produced more widgets. And then someone said, well, are you sure it was the lights? Well, install the lights, and we got more widgets. Well, let's turn off the lights and continue to count the widgets. So they turned off the lights, just like it was before, and guess what happened? They got more widgets still. Why was that? The attention. Nobody was counting the widgets before they installed the lights. But now the people on the assembly line says, hey, look, George, they're counting widgets now. Oh, I never did that before. Yeah, they're counting widgets. What do you think? Why do you think they're counting widgets? Well, they're probably trying to figure out if we're doing our job. Oh, you think so, George? Yeah, I think so. So as long as they're counting widgets, then we better make more widgets. It wasn't about the lights. It was about people who are paying attention and following through. So that's the Hawthorne Effect. Interesting. And so people, if they know that you care, people that know if you're paying attention to what they're doing, they will respond similar to the Hawthorne Effect, because I know the boss is going to ask. Synchronizing other sections or divisions of a degree of ownership. We already talked a little bit about this. You need to do this. You cannot operate in a silo. You cannot create a project when it has any degree of linkage outside of your section or division and expect it to be successful. Again, if it involves IT, get IT involved and get them involved early. If it has to be paid for, then get fiscal involved early. If it's a grant, get your grant people involved early. They have to be at the very first meeting when you're planning this project, and they need to take a degree of ownership. Because likewise, if they say, ooh, look, your project, and your grant requirements here, it says that we have to submit all the bills and pay or submit the grant to the federal government by September 31st. That's going to be a problem, says budget, because we have our single point audits that are due in September. So that's going to be too much work to submit for the goals or the grants in September. Can we back it up to August? Sure. See how that works? If you'd waited till September and then called up the grant people and say, hey, we need to submit this, they're going to say, sorry, I'm stuck. So this is so incredibly, incredibly important. Again, fleet, IT, grants, budget, it doesn't matter. Get all these people together if you're going to make the processes of the organization work to support you. Synchronize all the moving parts. Again, we just talked about this as well. You know, I used to when I was an assistant chief, the battalion chief, sometimes it would tell me, he says, you know, boss, I'm an operations guy. I'm into paperwork. You know, so when it comes to managing fires, I'm your guy. When it comes to paperwork, you got to look for George instead. I says, okay, let me get this right. So when you're a battalion chief, when it comes to the extent of your job, about 7% of the time that you have on task is managing fires, and 93% of the time that you have on task is organizational management, which includes paperwork. So what you're telling me is that you don't want to do 97% or 87% or I'm sorry, 93% of your job. Good? Yeah, that's what you're telling me. That's, you know, no, I just told you I don't like paperwork. No, you told me that you don't like 93% of your job. So why in the world did you promote to battalion chief? So you know, you have to establish these expectations in your people. And so this is why I put in this slide about battalion chief management forms, because I used to say, okay, you need to sit down and spend time with your captains. You need to sit down, and when it comes to an executive action memo from all those from LA County Fire, how many were here from LA County Fire? I know 2, 3, 4. Oh, do you know what an EA is? What an EA is? Yeah, executive action memo. It requires something of us to do. And so what I tell the BCs is that, our battalion chiefs, if there's an executive action memo that comes out, and it says, all captains shall by this date. Battalion chief, when you go visit your stations, and when an executive action memo comes out like that, is it a good thing or a bad thing to bring the captain in the office, hang out with the folks, yeah, have a cup of coffee, bring the captain in the office and say, hey, John, how's executive action memo 347 coming? What? No, 347 about face piece fist testing. I must have missed that. Chief, we get way too many emails. You know, I get 10 emails a day, Chief. 10 emails a day. How can I exist like that? I get those kind of comments too, or at least I used to. You know, so honestly, you need, and so this is part of the expectation that, okay, really, read your flipping emails, because it had something that was specific to you that you're supposed to do. And that way this captain is going to understand when the red Suburban pulls up, oh, the BC is going to ask me if I'm doing my job. Is that micromanaging? No, it's not. It's follow through. It's religious follow through. Not telling them how to do it, just establishing an expectation that they indeed are doing it. So that's what you need to do too. So however you do your monthly management meetings and your expectations, you got to have it, because it's critical to process, it's critical to follow through, it's critical to execution, it's critical to doing your job. Monthly planning sheets. Oh, this is what people used to make fun of me for too. Monthly planning sheets. I'm kind of weird about this. I used to try to lay out my month. What do I want to accomplish in a month? How am I going to accomplish it in a month? And I would set aside times on my calendar to work on those projects. This is important both for what you do and what your people do. Plan. A failure to plan is a specific recipe for failure, because if you purpose to choose at nothing, then chances are that's exactly what you hit, is nothing. So monthly planning sheets, highly suggest you do that. Yes, sir?
Chief, being that you said that you like to plan out your month, in fire department, fire service, and environmental health, things can change on the drop of a dime.
Oh, yeah.
Account for sticking to or coming back to your plan, even though those changing elements occur.
One of the things I do is I used to take my strategic plan. And if there are pieces of that plan that are due in February, then obviously I'm going to set time aside for those pieces of plan that I own or my people own, and I'll set time aside to accomplish those things. Now, you are exactly right. Things change in a dime. So what you never want to do is to devote 100% of your time to all the projects you know about, because that's a recipe for failure too, because you're right, things change in a dime. So you don't want, you need to leave open time for those, hey, Metro, this is your boss. I need this by 5 o'clock this afternoon. We all get those from time to time too, don't we? So you don't want to jam up all your time on projects you know about. You got to leave time open for thinking. You got to leave time open for accomplishing those things that change as they always do. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So we spent some time on process. Effective project management. Again, a class in of itself, but set a goal and be specific. If you got projects, make sure that if you want a 4-legged hippo with 2 curly red tails, that's exactly what you get. Make sure that you articulate in meaningful form what the end result of this project is going to give you. Articulate how this goal fits into your strategic plan, into the department's strategic plan. Because when you do that, then people who have a piece of the pie will get to look at what the entire pie looks like. And that can be motivating for most people. Break the project down into measurable objectives for which you can measure. Sequence the objectives. These are all part of effective project management. Methods of measuring project or progress towards a goal. I cannot stress this enough. You have to have a process down by which you have regular meetings with your people, You ask specific questions about how things are going. You're not micromanaging them, but you're following through. Religious follow through if you want to be an effective leader and have effective processes, which is one of the 3 pillars of management. Religious follow through, and incredibly, incredibly important, make sure that the other components of your organization, or especially in the job you do, even outside your organization, are all synced in with your plan if they have any degree of ownership in that project, anything at all. So process, project management, measuring progress towards a goal, religious follow through, and syncing other components of your organization or outside your organization to your projects. Any question about process? Yes, sir.
You said you went to the, when you got your promotion, you went to get the keys. Obviously, the organization had a process or lack of process at the time.
Mhm.
You were going to implement your process. Did you find it difficult to change the mentality within the organization, or did your expectations delineate to the ones below you that we're going to have to raise to a different level than what it was expected from the prior?
To be honest with you, I think our organization always had that expectation, but sometimes, especially in budget challenges, oftentimes the organization gets so flattened that they don't have time to follow through with what is happening at multiple levels below them. And frankly, I don't think the organization knew what was happening and what wasn't happening at that level of the organization. So when I came back and said, hey, to my new boss when I was assigned to EMS, this is the things that I'd like to accomplish. What do you think? Great idea, Mike. I'd never seen that before coming out of EMS, but great idea. So it was well accepted, a little bit strange, but well accepted. Does that make sense?
But how did you get the lower levels to understand the expectations of them to you, or now? Did you lay it out for them and say, no matter what it was before, it was, I was going to get it done, and it was going to get done, and it was going to get
That was part of that 90-day process I told you about. Is I sat down and I sat down with all my people when I was first assigned that position. Says, okay, well, the guy before me, he has no help. So I sat down with each individual and I said, tell me the top 3 things we're doing well. Tell me the 3 things you're doing not so well. And if you were me, what would be the first 3 things that you would do? And I got some great answers, which really effectively helped me create that section-based strategic plan. Because then you automatically get the buy-off of the people that have been entrusted to your leadership, because why? You asked them the question. You trusted them, you involved them. Yes, sir?
This might be getting a little too detailed, but do you see a value in kind of, before you even sit down and have that meeting, kind of letting people know what you're going to be asking, give them a little time involved, so that you're not getting kind of
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, many of these things I stumbled into. But one of the first things I did is I brought the entire team together in a collective meeting. Hey, my name is Mike Metro. M-E-T, Mike Metro. I came from here. Okay, got it. And I admitted to them. I says, I've never been involved in managing an emergency medical services program for an organization as large as LA County Fire Department. A couple of you have done that, maybe at lower levels. But I was honest with them. I says, we're going to have to figure this out together, folks. And I'm going to come to each one of you, and I'm going to ask you those questions. And put some time behind this. I don't want to hit you just cold turkey. And the looks I got from the people when I did that, were really, really incredible. It was really pretty cool. Other questions? Yes, sir?
Well, I think you actually kind of addressed it, but the religious follow-through aspect, it's hard for people to not see it as being micromanaged.
Yes.
But I guess if you explain in your initial meeting with them that it's not micromanaging,
Mm-hmm.
and that I want to make sure that if you have success, then it kind of takes care of that. The other part of that is if the other managers aren't doing that,
Yeah.
then you're perceived as the micromanager.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And here's a tactic you can use, is if you've got your Outlook process, our process is all squared away, and you know that on Friday there's a report due from one of your teammates. Now, your first inclination, if you do religious follow-through, is to do what? Is on Friday, say, hey, where's the report? Wait till Monday. And if you don't get the report on Monday, then you go back to your people and say, that is why I asked the question on Friday. And what do they say? What can they say? So that's a method or a tactic. I don't want to be manipulative. But that's what helps people understand that there's a need to this. Because at times I have been accused of being a micromanager. At other times, people say, I got so busy, Chief, I just forgot. Thanks for the reminder. You'll have it today. Sir?
Is that, just so I'm clear, the strategic plan, is that in that first 90 days, or your first 90 days is more of a orientation of sorts? Like when do you start working on building that strategic plan?
Really, in my mind, it's during that 90 days. Formally, it's after. Because one of the things we did is we had a great time. During that first 90 days, I asked those questions. Again, I never read the book the first 90 days, until fairly recently. So I just kind of stumbled through it by blind luck. But when I spent the first 90 days learning what emergency medical service is all about, I went to the EMS agency for the county, I went to the state, I began to look at the regulations and figure out what my job was about. Then when I figured that all of us had enough information, what we did is we went to the lifeguard training center on Manhattan Beach. Sometimes I wish I'd have been a lifeguard. Because they come to work in flip-flops and shorts. No, they used to. We went to the lifeguard training center because why? It was outside of our environment. And we had a strategic planning session at the lifeguard training center. And we had a great time all day long because we took what I learned during the first 90 days. Also, it helped the people during the first 90 days because they knew I was going to ask the question, formulate the things in their mind. What are the 3 bad things? What are the 3 good things? And what are the 3 things that I would do if I was him? And so that's how we developed that strategic plan, but it was after the first 90 days. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to mention that there's also a book by the same author, First 90 Days in Government,
Uh-huh.
that was very useful, as useful as the first one. And what it's about is developing a strategy to have all those critical conversations.
Mhm. Exactly.
To figure out what is the priority.
Mhm.
Because if you end up implementing your strategy and accomplishing all these great things, but it's not what really needed to get done or what your boss wanted you to get done.
Exactly.
Then you wasted all that time.
Exactly. And do not make the fatal mistake of developing a section-based strategic plan without talking to your boss or without having solid linkages to the department's strategic plan. Fatal mistake. Don't do that. Other questions? We have one more pillar to hit. We're not going to spend much time on it. It's strategic planning. And I tell you what, we could spend a lot of time on strategic planning. So, people, process, strategy. You have to manage all 3 of these fundamental core pillars of management in order to be successful. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about strategy. And again, this is not a strategic planning class. That is much longer than the time we have together. So again, I mentioned this before. If we aim at nothing, then it's exactly what we'll hit is absolutely nothing. You've got to have a strategic plan. And many people think, well, the organization has a strategic plan. Why do I need to have one if I'm in charge of a unit or a section or a division or a bureau? Why in the world do I have to have one? You have to have one. Because any organizational strategic plan is not going to get into the kind of details where you are living. And so you have to have one either at the unit or the section or the division level. I'd highly suggest you do that in coordination with your boss. Strategic planning is indeed a belief that the future can be changed. And I believe it can, especially in our environment. I just read an article by the city manager. Teresa and I live in Santa Clarita. And it was a pretty interesting article by Ken Striplin as the city manager. And he started listing some of the projects that were done in the city. The Cross Valley Connector. Anybody ever been to Santa Clarita? Traffic used to be horrible. It used to be miserable. But now they got the Cross Valley Connector that connects the 5 freeway to the 14 freeway. And it's like a residential freeway. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But in Ken's article, he says, we started planning that 18 years ago. Holy cow. 18 years ago. Oh yeah, and this park that just opened, that was an 8-year process. Oh, and this thing over here, that was a 3-year process. So let me tell you, your city is engaged in strategic planning. And again, this is the Achilles heel, I believe, of the fire service. Because as we go through the ranks on the operations side, to put the wet stuff on the red stuff side of the organization, We're really good at bringing calm to chaos when the bell goes off. But if it comes to strategically planning something that may occur 5 or 6 or 10 years from now, that's not what we do so well. That's not what we do so well. And so strategic planning is very, very important. And it does involve envisioning a future and planning accordingly. This is what strategic planning is all about, and we have to be strategic, especially in this time and day. How long do you think it's going to take an organization to plan and build a new headquarters building? Yeah, a long time. Because there's property, there's plans, there's money, there's all kinds of stuff involved with that. We have about 170 fire stations within the county of Los Angeles and probably 300 administrative facilities in total. How many of those are over 50 years old? A bunch. There needs to be a strategic plan in place on how we'll finance and build tomorrow's fire station. Because if a fire station is going to last for 50 years, once it's new, who are we going to be in 50 years from now? Are we still going to be driving around big giant fire trucks? Are we going to have a different kind of vehicle? Who are we going to be 50 years from now? See, and this is the strategic thinking that upper level managers need to do. One person told me that a CEO of an organization or a fire chief needs to be thinking 25 years down the road. Holy cow. I've seen some CEOs or fire chiefs that can't think past tomorrow. But 25 years. You know, a bureau commander, probably 10 years. Division, 5 years, at least. So these are the kind of things, and it's one thing to develop a strategic plan, but it's another thing to say, who are we going to be 5 years from now? That's a difficult question, especially in today's environment. And I tell you what, when it comes to emergency medical services in this time and day, who we are going to be 5 years from now is going to be nothing like we are today. I give this lecture too. I believe that we're on the precipice of such a significant change in our emergency medical services mission. It's very much like it was in the 1970s. What is the most significant thing that hit America's fire service in the early 1970s? Paramedicine. Paramedics. I was going to be a doctor when I was growing up. My mom was a nurse. I was all lined up to be going to the Air Force ROTC. They're going to send me to medical school. And this crazy television show called Emergency came on. Oh, yeah. Squad 51. And how John and Roy used to flip the caps on the D-50. Oh, I want to do that so bad. And my mom saw that I had an interest. Now, she wanted me to go to medical school. My mom saw I had an interest in this paramedicine thing. So she was a nurse locally. She says, how about if I get you right along on Los Angeles County Fire Department Paramedic Squad 37? I said, okay, Mom. And she did. And I rode along on Paramedic Squad 37, came back home, tore up my papers to the Air Force, and never looked back. And to the day my mom died, she'd say, if only. If only I had not arranged that ride-along, maybe you would have been a doctor. You know, but that revolutionized the fire service in the 1970s. Because EMS, it used to be put the wet stuff on the red stuff. But when it came to 1969 is when LA County implemented paramedicine. And in the 1970s, America's fire service implemented paramedicine. That was a paradigm shift to what we did. There was fire chiefs that would say, nobody is putting a needle in the hands of my firefighters because they have a job to do, and it ain't EMS. Well, I believe that same kind of paradigm shift is upon us right now that's going to redefine what we do when it comes to EMS. When it comes to your job in 5 or 10 years ago, or 5 or 10 years from now, is there a paradigm shift coming? This is where strategic planning comes in. And if you don't have a strategic plan in your section or in your organization, let's say your section or division right now, how long do you think a strategic plan should be looking forward? How long? How far down the road? What's that? 5 or 10 years, yeah. Most of them are 5 years, and you have to renew them because you know, sometimes your crystal ball isn't real good out past 5 years. But what you'll find is the very first strategic plan you'll develop for your section or your division will come nowhere close to 5 years. It typically would be probably 2 years, maybe 3 years. Any idea why? Exactly. Their event horizon is not used to thinking that far ahead. That's going to be your challenge, but that's okay. because you want the people to understand and envision it. And the first time out, they're going to have a very difficult time envisioning what happens 5 years from now at this level of the organization. At the high level, at the top of the organization, you better be envisioning what happens a long ways out than 5 years. But the first time you try it, where you operate, you're probably going to see it's going to be 2 or 3 years. And that's okay, because then the next time, then you'll be extending your event horizon and extending it even further. Anybody here from labor? Oh, I wish it was, because I oftentimes get an interesting comment when I make this comment. Labor has a sphere of responsibility. Management has a sphere of responsibility. If there is no overlap, then you will have a dysfunctional organization. If the sphere of management and the sphere of labor overlap, then you will have a much more successful organization, because now labor and management is on the same page. Should those spheres of influence be 100% overlapped? Is that healthy? No, it's not. It's not healthy at all. Because let me tell you why. Oftentimes, and I'm glad, again, it's fun when labor's here, because usually I get a rock in the head when I make this statement, is that labor's event horizon is typically no further than 2 years out. Why is that? Contracts, yeah, part of it. Promotionals, yeah, what else? Management change, turnover, you're on the right track. Typically, labor representatives are, how are they chosen? Elected. Typically, they're elected how often? 2 years. Exactly, yeah. And so really, if you want to stay involved in labor, then you have to get reelected. And if you get reelected in 2 years, who reelects labor? It's the folks in the fire station. Now, the folks in the fire station, how long is their event horizon? 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's the time they get off work. I'm being somewhat facetious. But oftentimes, the folks that elect a labor union director will have a very narrow event horizon. And when it comes time to reelect that person, typically the question that will be asked by the person who's putting their name on the ballot will be what? What have you done for me lately? Exactly. And so this is the difficult challenge with labor, is because, I use this term carefully, but politically, their event horizon typically is very short, where management has to be much further out there. You know, so I never forget the first time I told this, our labor president was in the room. And when I got done with my presentation, he said, hey, all that stuff you said before, great stuff. That thing about a short event horizon, let's go talk. But it's true. It's true for the most part. And so that is why that your spheres of overlap probably should never be 100%. Because you're going to be thinking about money to build fire stations or to buy new vehicles 5 or 10 years from now. The labor folks are going to looking at raises in the next contracts and get reelected. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't want to make such a cold appraisal of labor, because those guys have a great purpose, and they used to keep me grounded. We would have some great conversations. And sometimes I would win, sometimes they would win. We'd walk out shaking hands, and we're better for it, because they had great perspectives that sometimes I lacked. And that's like in Teresa's My Marriage. Oftentimes she'll have a perspective that I don't have, I'll have a perspective that she doesn't have, but together we can come up with a pretty clear perspective. And so that's where labor and management has to work together. Should labor be involved in the development of a strategic plan? How? How should they? Should you invite them to a strategic planning session? I don't know. Some people are saying yes, some people are saying no. Yeah, you can do either way. I think it might get a little bit, because what you'll find is typically labor won't commit. Because again, if labor were to say, vote for me because I helped develop a strategic plan that will shape the organization and how we're going to look like 5 years from now, what will the person say that elects them on the next ballot? 5 years from now? Really? What have you done for me lately? So there's a challenge there. But during the first 90 days, when you're talking to your people, when you're talking to your boss about what your boss expectations are, if you're in that level of the organization where you have the ability to speak to labor, should you be asking labor what they would like to see? Absolutely. whether you invite them into a strategic planning session or not. Maybe, maybe not. I would say probably not, but you ought to have labor's specific input prior to walking in there, and then show them the document when you walk out. Say, hey, did we meet your expectations here? Do we hit it? Yeah, it looks good. Because labor will have a hard time committing to things that are that far out. That's just the nature of the business. So, we've got 3 minutes to talk about everything you want to know about strategic planning. No. But anyway, you get the idea. I think we've talked about the essence and the need for strategic planning. You got to have it. And how many of you operate as a leader within a section or a division? And most of you do. Good. And so again, you really need to have that strategic plan for a number of reasons. When you promote, and the next person comes in behind you, can you imagine? This certainly would be a cup of coffee and a set of car keys. Say, here's our strategic plan. It's going to help you understand what to do in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. Incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable. So, continuous, systematic process of accomplishing the future. Again, we're not going to talk about this. Anybody know what a SWOT analysis is? S stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Strengths and weaknesses are particular to inside or outside the organization? Inside. Opportunities and threats? Outside. Exactly. Is a grant an opportunity or a threat? Could be both, for those of you who have been involved in grants. But yeah, it's an opportunity. But how many times have you been stuck in a situation where you get a phone call and say, hey, there's a grant opportunity and we have to have the paperwork in by this Friday? Yeah, anybody involved in grants say that's lunacy. But so that's, again, understanding what your opportunities are down the road, and also understanding what your threats are from outside the organization. Do you think the Affordable Care Act is a threat or an opportunity to governmental service, specifically what you do? Threat or opportunity? Both. Yeah, it could be both. Can you turn a threat into an opportunity? Yes. Will the organizations that you work for be subject to the Cadillac tax on health care? Yes. Is that going to impact your organization financially? Oh, baby. Yes. So these are all things that you need to understand as managers that are coming down the road. That's a threat. It could be an opportunity if you engage in legislation that changes what the requirements are for a Cadillac tax. But I digress. So, strategy. Evaluate your section or division's effectiveness at carrying out your primary mission. One of the things I oftentimes see is that when a section or division is left to their own devices, you will suffer from significant mission creep. Again, most sections or divisions, when they're originally designed in the organization, they had a specific objective and mission and targets and everything they needed to do. When 5 years or 6 or 10 years goes by, oftentimes you'll see mission creep as different leaders gets in and puts their flavor to it. And sometimes that mission creep can get way off base, way off base. I know many times the reasons that EMS was first, the organizations of EMS management was first put in place in the organization was because of the EMS Act in 1980. And so when the legislative, its omnibus legislative package was enacted in the 1980s that put legislative framework to the mission of EMS, many fire departments began to put EMS sections and divisions in place to make sure they were doing the laws the right way. When we used to do strategic planning retreats with the California Association of Fire Chiefs, I'd ask the question, what regulations or rules dictate what you do in EMS? And I was amazed to see how many blank stares I got and how many people didn't even know that there were state statutes and regulations that specifically governed how they operated. And so that's a classic example of mission creep. That's why EMS was, or the management of EMS was first established back in the early days. And now later on, 10, 20, 30 years later, some people don't even know what legislation is that governs how they're supposed to operate. So mission creep is a big deal. Again, make sure that your plan at the section or division level is synchronized with your department strategic plan. Make sure you get your boss's buy-off and input, and the department's buy-off and input. So, what have we learned? The 3 pillars of management are people, process, strategy. What is the most important pillar? People. Good. When it comes to the future, you got to have strategy. Because if you aim at nothing, that's what you'll hit. But if you don't have the processes in place to support your strategy and your people, you will fail. Any other questions? I really hope all of you come back in 15 minutes from now for the leadership side of this, the essentials of leadership. Because again, don't think you can be a good manager without being a good leader. And we're going to talk about the specific character traits of being an effective leader. I'll give you a measuring tool and how you can measure yourself as an effective leader. And trust me, there's no raising of the hands how you did. This would be a private assessment of your own abilities, nothing like that. But the next half of this is equally, if not more important than the first half. Thank you very much. Hopefully see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you.